All right. Hi there, everybody. I'm John Mancini. I'm here both in my private capacity as president of Content Results and also as the analyst at the MER conference. And I have one of the speakers from the MER conference here, Steve Weissman, an old friend of mine. Steve, welcome to the show.
Not old, long time.
Do you remember where and when we met?
Gosh, I'm sure it was an AIM thing.
Yes.
I couldn't tell you specifically. I know one of my earliest AIM conferences was in New York in like 1990 nothing.
I'll tell you what it was. It was I can't remember who you were working for at the time, but there were these workflow best practices awards that you were giving out at the AIM conference.
The Process Innovation Awards, yeah.
Process Innovation Awards, that's what it was.
That would have been 95 I started those.
Yeah,
something like that.
I came to AIM in 96, so that would have been
okay.
when we picked it up. So it was that was a long time. So it's great to have you here. Tell everybody what you're doing now, what the Holly Group is all about, what that whole thing is.
Sure. How much time do we have? I am the InfoGov guy, and it's written in the rules. I have to stand like that when I say that. Yes. We're a consulting practice. The tagline that I use is doing information right. And it's, information governance / records management / all the managements, business process, document, it's all kind of rolled up into one these days. Primarily serving the buyers of said technology and the users of said business practices. I do work with vendors, but I do like it to have a customer benefit at the end rather than simply support their selling effort, for instance. Right. So, we research, we write, we speak. We don't go away when asked.
Well, you're very modest, for those of you that don't know Steve, he's an AIM fellow. I know that. He's a winner of the AIM Award of Merit, which is kind of like their Lifetime Achievement Award. And, I'm sure there's all sorts of other awards and things out there because you're very prolific and you're very well respected in the space. And
Thank you.
Really a pleasure to have you on here. So let's peek behind the covers a little bit, give people a sense of Steve Weissman as a person, and this might be a little scary, but what's the most unexpected thing on your they would find on your Spotify playlist?
See, I thought we were going to go through he's a tall, short fellow with well, it's funny. I love music and I subscribe to none of the services because I'm always bouncing around depending on what I'm in the mood for. And so I don't know that there's anything terribly surprising, but my tastes do run everywhere from Western swing to the Glee soundtracks.
Oh my gosh.
So it's certain, I guess you would say, populist opera pieces, although opera as a whole doesn't float my boat terribly much. Although I certainly appreciate the talent necessary. But it really depends what hour it is and what I'm doing, what ends up coming through the speakers.
Do you wander around or do you tend to go in cycles? I tend to I cannot work anymore unless I have something running through my headphones, but I tend to like glom onto something for like week or two periods, like just do the same thing over and over again to the point where it drives my wife batty because she'll hear me like singing, like while I'm typing or while I'm writing. Do you tend to wander or do you tend to have short-term commitments?
I guess I'd say I wander. I also would like, I'll put something on. Typically it'll be some kind of background jazz or something. You find one of those loops on YouTube that's 8 hours worth of music. And I just put it on and I kind of forget about it. And about, I don't know, 2.5 hours later, I'll kind of look up from my keyboard and it's like, is this still on? Gosh, that's terrible because they've moved into some other kind of.
Yeah. The algorithm has kind of moved in many directions.
So then I do the internet equivalent of spinning the dial.
How
Do they
about
still
TV
have
binging?
dials?
How about TV binging? You do any of that during COVID?
Oh, absolutely.
What's your fave there?
Again, there are a few. Yeah, certainly more recent times. I mean, we couldn't get enough of Succession.
I
It
haven't
was
done that
just,
yet. I'll do that. Okay.
oh, you should. It's so deliciously evil and twisted. It's like, I know that guy. No, um, it was very well written and very well performed and very disturbing. Just realized it's my phone doing all the dinging here. Um, lately, we're into on PBS Around the World in 80 Days
Oh, cool.
with David Tennant.
Yeah.
It's really, really well done. I definitely recommend that too.
Oh, I haven't seen that. And I love David Tennant. So
Yeah,
that,
no, he's amazing, and it's really a fun take. And PBS is releasing them like in the old days, sort of a week at a time.
oh,
Not like, here's the whole, or we'd be done with it already.
right.
And then out of a different corner, there was probably still is. I saw it on Netflix. There's a Danish production called Borgen, and it's a political show.
Yeah.
And I found it fascinating because it's the machinations of a coalition government, which of course we don't have here. And I never really thought about how that works. I mean, I kind of know, but because it's dedicated on you have to build the bridges everywhere, and it's in some ways, I guess it's sort of Succession like because everybody's looking for the angle. And that was also really well done and different.
Yeah,
And it improved my Danish language skills, not at all.
my daughter and son have gotten us hooked on Survivor, which we never watched in its original incarnation. But you talk about like this question of alliances and coalition governments and kind of all that kind of and duplicity and lying, cheating, and stealing and kind of all that kind of good stuff.
I tried that at the beginning and never really got into it because as far as I'm concerned, you're all off the island. Leave me alone.
It's not bad if you can watch it streamed without commercials, because then also you can just like plow through it a season like this. And then the other part, which is very interesting, is that the show has evolved. They have had 42 seasons so far of this show. Wow. And there's an entire, my son-in-law actually wrote an article for Men's Health magazine about like the ethos of Survivor and interviewed a lot of the people. And there's like passionate people out there about Survivor, like old school, new school. The older shows have kind of one approach. The new ones have a different, a very fascinating kind of cultural thing. But
okay, so on that same vein, which Darren in Bewitched? Which Darren?
It is like such an obvious question, Steve.
Yeah, I would draw the question.
It is Darren one. It is Darren one.
Absolutely.
Without a question. Although I will confess that I used to be in love with Elizabeth Montgomery, but that's another whole story.
Well, that's America's sweetheart. Are you kidding?
Yes, of course. All right, I guess we should talk about governance. So
yeah, I suppose.
So the idea behind this show, the reason for the name OxyMorons, is that I've always been fascinated with people that are able to operate at both the strategic and tactical levels. Typically I run into folks that are skilled in one way or another, but when people combine that's when stuff actually gets done in organizations. And so, when you think about that combination, what do you think are the most important skills in making that happen within an organization?
Well, it helps to have a really thick skin, for one. I don't know if that's a skill. I guess you could develop it.
Yeah.
In one word, I'd say communication. In two words, I would say surprise avoidance. And I mean that like in all directions of the organizational structure, up, down, sideways, even where there isn't a connection, because the tactics that you develop have to be in sync with the strategies. but the people you need to work with to develop either are different typically.
Yeah.
And so being able to somehow communicate or translate appropriately in both directions, I think is of vital importance.
That's
And
that's
yeah,
interesting. That idea of bidirectional translation, it becomes really, I think, a critical skill.
well, otherwise you end up in a situation where the people that are supposed to sort of do the new thing or accommodate a new philosophy or, depending on the detail, um, I often go in and I'll say, listen, the management has hired me to come and work with you because they really do mean that they want to do this better. And this is your opportunity to speak up.
Yeah, be heard.
And I know you've been through it before. This is not a case of where they're trying to do it to you, but they really are trying to do it for you. And if you don't say anything, I guarantee you're going to be unhappy.
Yep.
So tell me what, and I'm going to synthesize all of it, consolidate all of it, and let me bring it back upstairs to say, well, you want to do this and they want to do that. But in fact, there's a way to accommodate both or accomplish both. And that's what I'm here for, shovel, please.
Yeah, no, I think that idea of translation and of dialects becomes really important in a governance setting. I remember my friend, I think Mark Patrick from AIM stuff, and one of Mark's ideas is that one of the core skills is the ability and the requirement for governance people to understand the language that IT is speaking, the language that the C-level is speaking, the language that the legal people are speaking, and that sometimes we have a tendency to get so caught up in our own concepts that we miss those opportunities.
Well, a lot of this, I dare say most of this, you could actually, in a different context, label as marketing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I sometimes draw the analogy, well, you have kids, right? So you're familiar with this. How do you get people to do things they don't want to do, even though they're good for them? Eat your vegetables, clean your room, manage your data.
You have no idea, Steve, how timely that comment is right now, except not with my kids, but with an elder care situation.
Oh
right
gosh.
And you were like, you could have been in the room about an hour ago. So
no, I'm sorry to hear it. I mean, I've been through that too, but it is the same kind of thing. You got to alter the message to meet people where they are, to use their language. And that's really what marketing is.
Yep.
If you're doing it right. And then you open the door to the whole change management thing, right? To change the culture. We don't have 2 weeks to talk about that. So I'll just sort of plant the seed, leave you to come back to it if you want. But it's all wrapped up in that. And I'll encapsulate it by saying you have to do that even as you do all the raw governance stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
When I started doing this wacky stuff in the early to mid 90s, we called it something else then, but I used to sort of focus on the process end, how are we getting things done and how can we do it better, and then work on the people part. And over the years, they kind of grew to be, no, you have to do these simultaneously, and one informs the other. Otherwise, you end up playing catch up, however good a job you did.
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges that we've all had, and I've spoken about this as well, is this like triad of people, process, and technology.
Mm-hmm.
And we all give lip service to the first two, and then spend all our time talking about the last one. And it's not really a productive environment for most people. So let me ask you a question. I'm curious on your take on this. Is a lot of conversation about how the pandemic and remote work and all that stuff has affected the appetite and the understanding of what governance is all about. How do you think, has it affected it? And if so, how so?
Wait, there's a pandemic?
Yeah. Yeah. Wait, I forgot.
I don't mean to make light of such a serious thing, of course, but it's it's become such a part of daily life, professionally and personally. I do sometimes get this sense, even though as a medical issue, it's very much still front and center. It doesn't dominate, if you will, the governance conversations like it used to, and I find that really interesting. Um, I will say that the whole work from home bit, which of course, I mean, I've been doing that more on and off for decades.
Yeah, me too.
Of course, I had just gone to work for someone in an office 2 weeks before we all got to go home again. I'm like, I'm back.
Go away.
Yeah, no, the cats are like, Daddy. Excuse me. But it does, for a lot of organizations, it surfaced issues that they probably should have been paying attention to, but didn't. The whole notion of, okay, everybody's distributed.
Yeah.
How do we protect the information? How do we protect the connections? Pardon me. And one of the things that drives me most crazy, and has for years, is even when the end points of the connection are fortified beyond, vitamins and cereals. I always thought fortified with vitamins was a silly expression. But what about the connection in between? People, I'll go to a coffee shop. It's like, well, you're connected to their Wi-Fi. And I dare say most people who do that, they don't use a VPN, or they're using a connection. They got a hotspot through the cell phone. Well, the carrier owns that connection.
Yep.
What are you doing about that? So if you're going to do it, you really need to do it right. And now's the time when you really need to do it, because people are working at home and all signs are this is how it's going to be now. So you can no longer just say, here's a laptop, have at it, dial in once in a while. It's not good enough. But where you're taking that laptop and how you're protecting it there, unfold the onion, please.
Yeah, and I think it really puts a premium on moving away from these traditional Maginot Line kind of firewall-ish, preoccupations in terms of needing to think about how do you manage specific assets and classes of assets, and in a more intelligent way. It's a really hard problem. I don't mean to make light of it. It's
no, of course,
but and the number of organizations that pretend that problem doesn't exist is there are a lot of them. So that might lead to another question. There's a chance for you to vent. You've been doing this a long time. What's been what's some of the most frustrating things that you've experienced in terms of trying to convince people of the need for adopting good governance practices?
I guess I'm back to eat your vegetables.
Yeah.
Some days, in fact, we were just talking about this the other day. You talk about cycles through music. It does seem to be some sets of topical cycles. All of a sudden, my phone will light up with questions related to capture and imaging, which is an important part of the process. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the question per se, but I'm like, what year is this?
Yeah.
You're still asking about that, don't you? And they don't, and it is something to be mindful of, especially for someone like we two who have been at this for a while. That so much of the corporate world, and I dare say the government world too, for that matter, broadly, it's easy to get jaded. Most everybody else, they're just still working on this and trying to break them out of the mindset. It's like, well, yeah, that makes sense, but we already have a job to do, and that ain't it.
Yeah, it ties to something that used to drive me crazy. It was very difficult when I was at AIM because of that continuum of experience that exists out there. And one day you get somebody calling about a question of how do you apply AI and machine learning to automate the processes of governance, and and then like the very next day you'd get another call from somebody that says like, okay, well, tell me whether like 150 DPI is better than 300 DPI when I'm running a scanner, and it's like, wow, that's a big wide range of
Yeah.
of experiences to try to deal with.
And then of course they hate the answer.
Yeah.
Typical consultant. It depends.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So but my mantra for years and years has been, well, what business problem you're trying to solve?
Yep.
It's the t-shirt. The rest is just details. So I had a guy call me up. It was the end of August. He said, this story has the benefit of being true. He said, my boss told me beginning of August, I had $100,000 and I had to use it up before the end of August or I was going to lose it. So I bought an imaging system. Can you help me? Yeah, and that's pretty much what I said. And I couldn't help it because the first thing that came out of my mouth was, how did you know what to buy?
Yeah.
And that still happens.
Yeah, those kinds of things used to drive me batty too, because you would get somebody, they would say, oh, I want to adopt, content management, records management, information management, whatever you want to call it, and I've narrowed it down to 4 vendors, and I'd be like, okay, and then I'd say, well, what are those 4 vendors? And they'd rattle off 4 vendors, and I thought, wow, these vendors don't have anything to do with each other in terms of overlapping, on a problem set. And yet somehow they've wound up in vendor roulette, and they've, decided that, somebody has, gotten somebody on the phone, and they've selected these 4 that don't have anything to do with the kind of problem they're trying to solve.
And that's the key right there. But in their own defense, which I'm sure is misplaced, some of the more interesting projects I've done over the years has been to actually chart kind of spheres of influence for different vendors.
Oh, yeah.
Because there are multiple ways to solve the same problems.
Yep.
So that on its face isn't necessarily problematic, but I'll guarantee you their list of 4 vendors, if you traced it backwards, is the result of something I like to call management by magazine. That the boss was on a plane or somewhere,
yep,
read something in a magazine. How come we're not doing this?
Yep. I've done that, to be honest.
It's like, well, okay. And another of my favorite things to do is I talked to somebody and said, based on the description you've given me, Mr. and Ms. Prospect, let me guess what vendor sites you've been on. And I'm almost always right.
Yep. So talking about edgy technology, I have from my spies a note that says that you are going to be talking at MER about 3D documents. What on earth is that about?
It's about an hour. In truth, what I'll be talking about is the use of augmented reality.
Oh, okay, cool.
But that's scary. And when you look at some of the
Oculus,
well, yeah. Scuba. What caught my eye and caused me to label it that way, and I'll be showing this at MER, so those of you who are on now, when you get to that, you can sleep for that 30-second clip. But I think I drew a blank. I think it's Mercedes-Benz. What caught my attention was essentially a deck of cards that they have. That's a repair manual of sorts. It's designed to show how the mechanisms work.
Huh.
So a repair guy, it's almost like X-ray glasses into the human body or whatever. But it's an app on the phone or the tablet that you hold up in front of the card, and it pops up in 3D. And you see it running, and it's color coded, and so you can really get the context of what is this part and what does it do, and how does it fit in with. And then there are other examples that are similar to that. And I thought, essentially, that's a 3-dimensional maintenance manual in playing card form. That's cool.
That's very cool. Yeah.
So I think about, you've got a guy at the wellhead at an oil and gas company, and something's making a funny noise, and he wants to see what's in there. And that's assuming you hear the funny noise and the thing doesn't just break and now you're in trouble. So you can go back and get the thick book, or you can get the pile of CDs or whatever it is you've got there, because connectivity may not be so great. Or you can have this deck of cards in an app. And I thought, because he can keep that in his pocket.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So then the question becomes, how do you govern that? So I, adopt the obvious pun of, it's a new dimension in information governance.
Cool. Sounds like fun.
It's really cool. Every time I show it to somebody, they're like, wow. And I did a presentation for a nuclear energy group. And one of the guys told me afterwards, he said, yeah, we're looking into that for exactly that reason. And I thought, I was right.
It's really funny how you made me think of an experience that changed during COVID, which is that nobody wanted to, either on ordering from the restaurant when you go up to the door, or if you happen to be lucky enough to sit outside, nobody wanted to go through the risk of sanitizing menus and all that stuff. And so all of a sudden, these QR codes,
Yep.
which you couldn't get anybody to use for 10 years, all of a sudden that's a gateway to an additional piece of information, and namely the menu and the ordering processes and all that stuff. And it's funny how necessity drives you to all of a sudden relook at some of the things that were there all along.
And think about what it does for the restaurant in terms of the ability to change the menu.
Yeah, exactly. Really interesting. So tell me a little bit about like why MER? Why are you pitching that there?
MER is an interesting kind of cat, I think. In an age where conferences are struggling or disappearing, or both.
Yeah.
It's interesting because this one has some longevity. So it in a lot of ways, it's become a regular touchstone for people, which I think is really nice and really important. And also they have the magic E in the word,
Mm-hmm.
in the name word. And a lot of other groups, certainly they talk about, but it didn't have that right there in your face from the start. And I think that's really interesting as well. So I'm really happy to be there, kind of take advantage of that jump start in thinking, if you will. Whereas there are plenty of other groups I'll go to and I'll talk about a 3D document and they'll just sort of glaze right over.
Yeah. It's a place where there's a lot of really interesting, innovative ideas, I think, that pop up. And so last question, and then I promised you that we would only take about a half hour of your time. So we could go on a long time because it's a lot of fun. But kind of in the vein of a country western song, what do you know now that you wish you knew then?
Oh, I thought it was about having friends in low places. I think for me, it's sort of the disconnect, appreciating the disconnect between the logic of things and the people of things.
Yeah.
So you want to, essentially what we're talking about with all of this, it's information governance, information as an asset. I mean, it all kind of, the point is this is really important to your business. So you want to make smart operational choices as it relates to information, the same way you do about, what security system you buy and what kind of ergonomic chairs. I mean, conceptually to me, it's the same thing. And yet for a lot of organizations, one has nothing to do with the other.
Right.
I often group things, politics, baggage, and religion. Politics because this is my budget, not your budget. So I'm more important than you. or the baggage of, oh yeah, we tried that, it didn't work. And then you dig a little deeper and you find out, well, the technology actually worked fine, but you didn't do it right. You just sort of said, here, do this. And people went, not so much. Or the religion of, we're a Microsoft shop.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, good for you, but they don't have this. And it speaks Microsoft, by the way, so you can, and it doesn't have anything to do with the logic of it or the business case of it. It's just this knee-jerk reaction. I was going to say emphasis on the jerk, but I won't say that.
Well, thanks, Steve. It was fun.
It really was fun. I really appreciate the airtime. It's nice to see you.
It's nice to see you too, and we'll see you in Indianapolis, and probably sometime or other, hopefully at some other in-person venues between now and then.
Whichever comes first.
It would be nice. It would be nice to see people in person again.
It will. It really will.
So take care, and thanks a lot.
Thank you, John.